This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Sticks and Stones and Mud&Moans by R33sesPieces, composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk. Sirius stood in the doorway and glanced at the clock that hung over the kitchen sink. It was a muggle thing that ticked loudly and needed the batteries replaced every few months, but it kept time and tracked the moon phases in a way that didn't feel obtrusive and insistent. Waxing gibbous. Perfect. Remus stood at the stove, plating up the smoked chicken, brown rice, and roasted parsnips he'd made for dinner. Sirius switched into what James always called stealth mode, the light steps and lithe movements he used during pranking at Hogwarts, and crept up behind his husband. Just before he could plant a kiss on the back of his neck, Remus spun around and caught Sirius by the waist, pushed him back against their scrubbed wooden table, and kissed him fiercely. The plates hung in midair where Remus had been holding them, suspended in perfect stability by a wandless, hovering charm. Godric, he was so hot. Sirius loved when he did things like that.
What's gotten into you?
Remus murmured against his lips.
Why the sneaking?
Sirius shrugged and pulled their hips closer together, rubbing his half-hard cock against Remus's hip.
Nothing.
Something.
Just thought I'd see if I could surprise you.
Just testing the waters.
Remus arched a skeptical brow and cast a pointed look at the clock.
Is that so?
Sirius swallowed, and Remus watched his Adam's apple bob in his throat. He couldn't seem to tear his eyes away from Sirius's throat, actually. From the marks he'd left there the night before, from the tendons that shifted and flexed as he panted into the near silence, from the veins that pulsed and throbbed with the uptick in his heart rate. Sirius took a slow, calculated step to the side, a cautious attempt to slip out of the cage Remus had made of his body, and was delighted when Remus reacted with a low growl and a pair of surprisingly strong hands under his thighs. He boosted Sirius onto the table. Sirius may have hopped just a little, spread Sirius's legs wide enough to make his hips ache, and started to bite a new line of bruises from his earlobe to his clavicle.
Are you asking for trouble, Sirius?
Sirius tilted his head, baring his jugular to the predator who made his coffee and shared his bed.
No.
He lied, his body shivering and shuddering under his husband's touch.
Are you sure?
Remus asked, threading a hand into the roots of Sirius's hair, forcing Sirius to arch his neck and look into his eyes.
Yes.
Sirius said, meeting his gaze in a look of defiance that he knew would push Remus over the edge. He wouldn't be able to help it. This time of the month, the waxing moon, nearing full, not close enough to make him feverish and pained, but with the wolf scratching at his mind, Sirius could goad Moony into anything. Anything. Remus kissed him again, rough and hungry. The plates crashed onto the stove as Remus changed his focus from eating dinner to eating Sirius alive, nipping and biting at Sirius's lips until he tasted blood. He pulled back and looked Sirius over, from his disheveled hair, down the mottled claim he'd laid across his neck, past the erection straining at the zip of Sirius's jeans, to his stockinged feet. He eased back, Sirius leaning forward, his body instinctively trying to close the distance. Remus's long, bony thumb swiped across his lower lip, coming away red-streaked with Sirius's blood, then slipped past his lips to suck it clean. Then he gave Sirius a sharp, predatory smile.
Run!
Sirius jumped off the table, pushed past Remus with a maniacal grin, cast a quick glance at his boots on the mat before deciding no, he didn't have time, and sprinted through the door and into the garden. He raced across the open lawn, panting and giddy, slowed only by the throbbing hard-on between his legs and the slip of his socks on the dewy grass. A look over his shoulder confirmed Remus stood stock-still, bathed in the warm kitchen light, watching his every move with a hunter's eyes. Sirius barely even slowed to yank off his socks. He'd find them later, the warm wool discarded somewhere just short of the stone fence. His pulse pounded in his ears, and his blood whooshed through his veins. He'd never, ever felt more alive. He vaulted over the low wall in one smooth leap, and then he heard the door slam behind him. It wasn't worth it to look. He knew Remus was chasing him. That was the goal. Sirius's toes pushed against soft loam and last autumn's leaves as he broke past the tree line, his instinct pushing him down a deer trail he had run with Moony on the full a dozen times. He ducked a tree branch here, hurtled over a fallen log there, hissed as he stumbled through an icy stream. He considered going padfoot. The dog's stamina was greater than Sirius's, and the thick pads of his feet better suited to a run through the sticks and pine needles that littered the forest floor. But no, Mooney couldn't change at will, and it wasn't fun if the fight wasn't fair. No magic, just power. He slowed his pace and focused on controlling his breathing, straining his ears to hear the panting or footfalls of his pursuer. The forest teemed with life around him. Wind rustled through the trees, frogs sang in a distant pond, fox kits cackled and barked as they played outside their dens, and a werewolf silently stalked his prey. Sirius stopped to get his bearings, then made for a clearing where they frequently bedded down at the end of a full moon. Their scents should both be thick there, if Mooney could even smell him in his human form, so it shouldn't be clear whether Sirius was present or it lingered from nights gone by. He'd hide around the edges, blending into the shadows cast by the low dogwood branches and thick sycamore trunks, whilst Remus chased his trail, then slipped past him and double back. He crossed the clearing with heavy, dragging steps, making sure to leave marks and brush against the trees on the far side. Then he followed his own path back, launched himself as far from the entrance as he could, and huddled in the darkness to wait. It didn't take long. Remus caught up to him before his breath evened out, his own chest heaving and brow sweaty. His husband stood at the edge of the clearing, all sharp eyes and supernatural hearing. He sniffed the air, maybe he could scent him, and crouched at the foot of the trail Sirius had laid.
Oh, sweetheart.
He murmured, barely loud enough for Sirius to hear, and cast a look around the ring of trees. His eyes skimmed past Sirius's hiding spot without pause, and he took 2 slow steps toward the open center. Sirius shifted his weight, heart racing, planning to creep but poised to run if he needed to. Remus's eyes locked on him, and he smiled in a way that made a chill run down Sirius's spine.
Gotcha.
He prowled around the tree line, herding Sirius further away from his escape route, never letting him out of his sights. Adrenaline coursed through Sirius's veins as his options raced through his head. Remus had pushed him further up the clearing than he wanted to go, so he was backed against a patch of bracken he wouldn't be able to run through. He could let Remus keep pushing, hoping to lead him nearly around the full circle, then try to make a break for it in the hopes his longer rest and height advantage could set him free. Or he could leverage his physical advantage and face him in the open. Sirius heaved a deep breath, adjusted his traitorous fattening cock in his trousers, and stepped into the silver light of the clearing. Remus watched him the whole way, face impassive, as he kept himself between Sirius and their home.
Hi, Moonshine.
He said with his cheekiest grin.
Beautiful night we're having.
Remus hummed, a growl that started low in his chest and turned Sirius's knees to jelly.
It was nice, wasn't it? I cooked a delicious meal, had a tub of ice cream in the freezer, and the Smiths on the turntable.
He stood in a low crouch, arms spread wide, poised to strike.
Until my husband decided it would be fun to lead me on a wild goose chase, that is.
Sirius took a slow step to the side, and Remus mirrored it, never letting Sirius closer to his goal.
Now I'm here, in the middle of the bloody woods, ravenous, and needing to teach my dog a lesson.
They moved at the same time. Sirius broke for the trail, and Remus lunged for Sirius. He was faster than Sirius gave him credit for, his athleticism heightened by the moon's proximity, while Sirius was slowed by his abused feet and the heavy, aching erection in his jeans. Remus hit his knees and ducked under Sirius's outstretched arm, grabbing his forearm on the way past. Sirius's wrist twisted painfully behind him, his leg tangled with Remus's, and then he was flat on his back with all the air knocked out of his lungs. Remus was on him in a blink, straddling his hips and pressing him down, trying to force him into submission. He was strong, especially at this point in the moon, but he was still Remus, the golden sprite Sirius had fallen in love with in the first place. Sirius pushed off the ground and rolled them over, trusting his size advantage. He smirked down at his husband from his perch between his thighs and opened his flies with unhurried confidence. The release of pressure on his weeping cock, the cool night air on his pre-cum-soaked pants, and the anticipation of fucking his perfect, beautiful husband senseless made him shiver. It wasn't fun if they planned something like this. It had to be an honest, fair grapple, with the winner dominating in more ways than one. Tonight, he ended up on top.
Oh, darling.
Sirius cooed.
You didn't think you could beat me, did you?
He stroked himself lazily, leaning forward to hover over Remus's body, and caged him in with one arm.
I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and most importantly...
Sirius stopped his rhythm to run a finger over the bulge of Remus's zipper.
You like knowing I own you.
Sirius watched his own hands pop the button open and ease the pull down a few teeth, salivating at the very thought of Remus's dick bobbing free. Then Remus was gone, squirmed out from under him in less than a breath, and wrapped around Sirius's back in another. He fisted the roots of Sirius's hair and pulled, forcing his neck and back into an elegant arch. The wheeze of Sirius's breath through his windpipe reverberated through the quiet clearing.
You
Remus hissed into his ear.
have been a very bad dog.
He wrapped his left hand around Sirius's wrist and swung it in a wide arc under his body, then pinned it to the forest floor over his head. Sirius collapsed onto his stomach, pressed flat by Remus's body heavy on his own. The hand that had been threaded into his hair pressed his face into the soft earth, swept clean of sticks and stones by his arm under Remus's direction. The part of Sirius's brain that wasn't currently marinated in adrenaline noted. Steady pressure held him in place, while a rough hand yanked his trousers and pants just below his arse. The zip of his jeans scraped the inside of his thighs and his dick rutted into the dirt, and Sirius was grateful for any friction on his aching cock, even if it was incidental to Remus's use of his body.
I was going to eat you out.
Remus growled.
I was going to devour you until you were sloppy and gaping, begging me to fuck you.
Yes.
Sirius moaned, body shuddering in pleasure at the thought of Remus's tongue at his hole.
Yes, please.
No.
Remus barked with a sharp slap to his arse. Sirius hissed and twitched his hips, unable to stop himself from responding to the touch.
You squandered that opportunity, for both of us. Do you know why, Padfoot?
Sirius shook his head, dirt smeared across his forehead, and he spat mud away from his mouth.
Because you cannot be trusted.
The hand on Sirius's wrist disappeared. A moment later, Remus's slick length rutted between his cheeks, the head catching on his hole and leaving him breathless before sliding past.
Now be a good boy and stay.
On the last word, Remus pushed his cock past Sirius's tight rim and forced all the air out of his lungs. The stretch was excruciating and delicious. The burn seeped deep into his pelvis and down to his curling toes. He didn't prep Sirius at all, didn't give him a moment to adjust, and Sirius gasped and whined his thanks into the forest floor. He would feel this for days, the echo of Remus's loving violence in every movement and shift of his weight. Sirius felt overwhelmingly full as Remus fucked him, not pulling back far enough to let him up, his face still shoved to the ground. He canted his hips in time with Remus's thrusts, meeting his pace and rubbing his leaking cock into the dirt on the downstroke. His hands scrabbled for something, anything to grab onto, but he was only met with loamy soil and decaying leaves.
Filthy, horny puppy.
Remus nipped at his ear and stilled deep inside him, grinding against his prostate and trapping his dick between his body and the forest floor.
Humping the ground like an animal. You don't have a rational thought in your head, do you, love? There's nothing left in there but fear and desire.
Sirius whimpered and wiggled, not even sure if he was trying to free himself or make himself come. Remus clucked his tongue.
And that, my love, is why I always win.
Remus released Sirius's head and pushed himself up onto his knees, and suddenly Sirius was naked, with the rough denim of Remus's trousers scratching against his thighs. Sirius pushed himself up on his hands and knees and rocked back and forth, spearing himself open again and again on Remus's shaft. His husband's movements became uneven and disorganized, jerky strokes that stretched Sirius's rim as he pulled back. Sirius knew Remus was nearing his end, and he wasn't going to get it. In one swift movement, Sirius wrenched himself out of Remus's grip and staggered to his feet. A quick glance around the clearing told him his clothes had been vanished, and his wand had never left the cottage, which meant his only option was a nude sprint through the forest. He took one stumbling step and was pulled to the ground by his ankle. He flipped himself on his back and tried to scramble free out of Remus's reach, but Remus was too fast. He planted himself between Sirius's legs, threw his knees over his shoulders, and shifted forward, pinning Sirius down with his own body weight.
What did I say?
Remus snarled, each word accompanied by a sharp spank. Sirius could feel the heat radiating off his abused cheeks and the flush that spread over his body as he accepted his fate.
I told you to stay, and you didn't. And now you're going to be punished until you learn how to be a good boy.
Sirius's mind buzzed and his body went limp at the words, even if they weren't directed as praise. He let Remus fold his body in half, his knees by his ears, hips screaming in protest, as Remus pushed back inside. He set a brutal pace, hitting Sirius's prostate on each sharp, rapid thrust. It was savage and wild, and the most erotic thing Sirius had ever experienced. Remus smelled of sweat and earth, of pine and petrichor, of musk and mulch and moonlight.
You belong to me.
Remus grunted, his breath hot on Sirius's neck, each word punctuated by the sharp snap of his hips.
You are mine.
He looked like he wanted to eat Sirius alive, and Sirius would let him, would cut out his heart and hand it over, bloody and still beating, as a sacrifice to the primitive deity who lived between his thighs. If that's what it took for them to be together forever, so be it. He'd happily let Remus consume him.
Yours.
Sirius breathed. It spilled past his lips like a prayer, a solemn vow in the light of the moon, mingling with Remus's name and his breath.
Yours, Remus, yours, yours.
Remus pressed their mouths together, too many teeth to be considered a kiss, more of a devouring, with Sirius willingly turning himself over as the meal. He worked his hands under Remus's jumper, the wolf dressed in sheep's clothing, and rucked it up over his ribs, feeling the press of his soft abdomen against his stomach. His cock was trapped between them, his pre-cum and their sweat mixed with the dirt on his chest, in a kind of hedonistic alchemy of pleasure and its place in the natural order. He bared his throat, a tribute. Remus accepted. He let Sirius's legs fall wide around his hips as he bit down on the join between Sirius's neck and shoulder, sinking his teeth into the soft flesh until the skin broke and a thin line of blood trickled down Sirius's back. The pain sent a jolt down Sirius's spine and into his cock, and then he was gasping, arching, coming, spilling over, painting their stomachs with the offering of his spend. He raked his fingernails down Remus's back as he fucked him through the overstimulation, clawing at anything that might tie him to this plane when his mind wanted to ride ecstasy into the night sky. They were naught but star stuff, Sirius knew, and even his little deaths would lead him back there again. Every drop of blood under his nails, every gasp of oxygen into his lungs, honored where they'd been and where they had yet to go. Remus groaned and shuddered as he increased his pace, throwing Sirius's calves over his shoulders to pound into him with reckless abandon. Sirius let him, mind floating on waves of bliss and adoration. He did little more than frown in confusion when Remus pulled out and left him empty, and he smiled in beatific joy when he pulled himself off with 3 rough strokes and came in pearly ropes across Sirius's chest, marking him as his own. Sirius dragged his fingers through the mess, mingling them together along with their blood, sweat, and the earth, in an instinctive binding ritual even he didn't fully understand. His knees splayed wide as Remus collapsed onto his chest, kissing him with the copper taste of Sirius's blood on his tongue. Remus kissed along his jaw and down the column of his throat before he settled his head against the curve of Sirius's neck, his heavy, humid breaths giving rise to goosebumps along Sirius's skin. Sirius brushed feather-light fingers up and down his spine as they came back to themselves, the rolling thunder in their hearts slowing to a steady thrum. His head was fuzzy, and his eyes still unfocused when Remus propped himself up on his elbows. He stroked a thumb over the arch of Sirius's cheek.
Hi, baby, are you okay?
Sirius blinked up at him slowly with a dopey half-smile.
Perfect.
I know you are. It's why I married you.
Remus laughed, kissing his forehead sweetly. He tucked himself away in his pants, which were still somehow only halfway down his thighs, and conjured a glass and some water.
Drink this, please.
Sirius did as he was told, grimacing at the metallic taste of magic that he hadn't noticed existed until Remus had removed it from his life. Remus smiled.
I meant, how do you feel? Are you hurt?
Sirius rolled his neck and flexed his shoulders, checking for any damage beyond what could be expected from a solid fucking. The bite on his shoulder had a delicious throb, and he looked forward to watching it turn purple, then blue, then green, then yellow. His hips were sore, and his wrist was bruised, but overall, nothing he wasn't actively seeking.
I'm good, Moonbeam. Never better.
Remus couldn't take him at his word. He ran tender fingers over Sirius's body and frowned at every mark. Sirius smiled and smoothed the furrow in his brow.
I'm fine, love. Ready to clean the cum and mud out of my chest hair. But otherwise, I'm great. I can't help but notice you aren't this worried about your scratches.
Remus craned his neck over his shoulder and scoffed.
I've had worse from the cat.
He hadn't. Dolly adored him. She'd never so much as hiss at Remus.
Do you want me to apparate us home, or can you walk?
Sirius tried to push himself up, but his knees shook and his legs were jelly. He shook his head.
Apparate, I think. Can you do it? Do you have your wand?
There's a werewolf fuck in the woods. Of course I grabbed my wand.
Remus flung Sirius's arm over his shoulder and twisted on his heel, and within seconds they stood in their bathroom. Remus settled Sirius gently on the vanity, kissed the tip of his nose, and turned on the shower before returning to stand between his knees. He eyed the bite with trepidation and met Sirius's eyes in question.
I assume you'd like to keep that?
Yes, please.
Sirius nodded. Remus smiled.
So polite. I should shag you into submission more often. Can I at least clean it and heal it over?
Sirius nodded again, and Remus got to work on the wound, cleaning charms, sterilizing ointment, something that itched and gave him a scab where Remus's teeth had broken the skin. Whilst he worked, Sirius picked at the sticks and mulch caught in his golden curls. Then, as steam filled the room and fogged over the mirrors, Remus did the same for Sirius, putting the leaves and pieces of clover in a little pile by Sirius's hip. He ran a clean flannel under warm water and wiped the mess from Sirius's chest hair, running the cum and dirt muck in grayish streaks down the drain. Finally, he knelt at his feet and took one in his hand. He scoured it with magic until it was pink and shiny, then got to work checking for cuts or injuries that Sirius mightn't have noticed with the endorphins flooding his system. He pulled out a bramble that had wedged itself in Sirius's heel, repaired a torn and bleeding toenail, and rubbed at the soles of his feet until Sirius was relaxed and sighing. He repeated the process on the other foot, eyes flicking up to Sirius's face to check in whenever he found something that might hurt. Sirius had never felt so adored, so cared for, as in moments like this, when Remus took responsibility for his well-being. Sirius was fine. He knew he was fine. But he also knew Remus worried, and he struggled to do anything that might hurt Sirius at all. So when Sirius asked him to chase him through the woods and fuck him like an animal, he had to let Remus tend to him like a devoted healer when it was over. Sirius loved him firm and rough, loved when he let his primal side have control so he could give himself permission to take without intent to give back. But he loved him like this too. Loved the soft touch of his hands and gentle kisses pressed to his knee, loved the sweet words he whispered and the worry creasing his brow. Sirius loved him, loved every little piece of him he'd ever discovered, and all the deeply buried bits he knew were yet to come. Satisfied with Sirius's comfort, Remus stood and offered Sirius his hand, helping him down from the counter. He made to sweep the pile of refuse into the bin before Sirius stilled his hand.
Wait.
Remus turned to him, brows drawn, and Sirius felt heat flood his cheeks. This was ridiculous. And yet,
I want to keep some of those. Press them in a book or something. I don't know.
the idea of having a souvenir, something to remember this night, appealed to him, and he didn't want to toss them away like it hadn't mattered.
Baby, are you going to make me a trophy? Something special to remember the first night I beat you in a fight?
Remus asked, a grin lighting up his face.
I let you win.
Sirius said, trying and failing to pout. Remus threw his head back in a laugh, damp golden curls tumbling down his back.
Of course you did, baby. I never doubted you.
He kissed Sirius softly on the lips, then ran a thumb over the bitten swell as the tingle of a healing charm shot through it. Sirius didn't complain. There were some things his big bad wolf just couldn't handle. All the better to kiss you with, my dear. Sirius pressed their lips together again and melted into Remus's body, allowing himself to be backed and maneuvered into the warm spray of the shower in the comfort of his lover's arms. Benite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk.